So, ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to our today class. So, in today class, we are going to look at the concept of variation. And of course, on Earth, there are millions of living organisms that exist. And of course, each of the species of the living organisms has its own different characters which distinguish it from other organisms. Like, for example, humans have some specific characters that distinguish them from other organisms. Like, for example, if human can talk, other animals cannot talk. Humans can move from one point to another, while plant can only respond some part of the body what a stimulus. So this is actually some characteristics that make one species differ from one another. But of course, within even the same species, they may be different. So that is why there is no any individual or there are no two individuals of the same species that have the same characters or that are exactly alike. So even within the same members of the species, they differ. There must be a difference. So there is no single organisms that, of course, look exactly the same. Even identical twins, there must be different. So that is what variation is trying to tell us. The variation, that is the differences that exist within organisms of the same species, like in humans. So what are the differences that exist between human of different species, even from the same family, even even from some other identical twins? What are the differences that exist between them? So that is actually variation. So the differences that exist between individual of the same species is what we call variation. And of course, we know that within different species or between different species, there must be that variation. So now, what about within the same species? There is also that variation. So that is what we want to check. So variation, of course, is a differences that exist even between the cells, individual organisms, or group of organisms of any species. So, of course, the variation can be actually checked starting from the cells levels, from cellular level, at an individual organisms levels, or from the group of organisms of any species. So you can do that. So the differences that exist between cells, individual species, or group of organisms of any given species is what we call variation. So, of course, we have this variation can caused either by the genetic differences. So maybe the genetic differences, that is a genetic makeup of a particular living organism. Maybe the difference is from the DNA. And of course, mostly if there is a difference in a DNA, that is the genetic variation. Because whenever we say genetics differences, it means genetic variation. So if there is a genetic variation, of course, because when we say genetics variation, it means that the difference is from the DNA. It's from the DNA. That is a genetic makeup. So that is why cause genetic differences is also called mutation. So whenever there is a mutation in the DNA, so that's what we call, of course, genetic differences, and there must be phenotypic or morphological difference once there is genetic differences. And also it can also caused by environmental factors. So genetic differences, or we call it mutations, and environmental factors on the expression of the genetic potential, that is phenotypic variation, are the major causes of variation. So mutation or genetic differences is associated variation or environmental factors. So these are the two major causes of variation within organisms of the same species. So then now Let's now look at how this variation, where and where variation may be shown. So of course, variation may be shown at from the physical appearance. You can see maybe within even identical twins, you can see that they possess different physical appearance. So the variation can exist in physical appearance. Maybe you can have identical or twins. One is having fair color and the other one have a black color. One is taller and one is shorter, and that is variation. And of course, the same within the same family, the same mother, you can also see that variation. Maybe one is shorter, one is taller, and maybe the parents are all tall, but they may have a shorter child, and that is physical variation. And it may actually come from metabolism. We know that when we said metabolism is a total biochemical or biological reactions that are taking place in the body. And of course, this metabolism can be anabolism, can be anabolism, can be catabolism. So maybe the way within the same organisms, maybe someone will tell, okay, he liked taking breaks. Someone, the other person within the same family, someone will say that okay, he liked taking beans, and the other one say would like taking rice and beans, and someone will say that no, he only want to take rice. He doesn't need beans. So this kind of difference is the kind of the metabolism. It means that the person that like beans is having more of the enzymes of digesting beans. And of course, the person that doesn't like beans is because maybe the enzymes or the proteins that are involved in processing the beans are produced in smaller quantity in the body. So that is actually metabolism and fertility. Within the same organism or within the same family, you can see that some people are fertile while some people are infertile. And of course, that is variation. So you can see variation in fertility. You can also see it in the mode of the production. Some people are within the same species or within the same family. You can see that some people are very, very sexually active, while some people from the same family or from the same species, you will see that they are less sexually active. And then, of course, the behavior among organisms, even organisms of from the same family, from the same species, the behavior varies. The behavior varies. So you can see variation, learning and also mental ability. You can see that within the same family or the same species, some people are intelligent while some people are less intelligent. So learning and mental ability is also uh it's also exists as a variation. So then the next thing is the other obvious or measurable characters can also be considered as the system where variations are shown. So then the next thing that we are going to look at is of course the different types of variation. So the different types of variation here, we are starting with continuous variation. So in the continuous variation is show or shows a complete range of the characteristics within a population. So it usually come as or in a form of a range. Usually come as a form of a range. It's an intermediate. It means that there is an intermediate. So usually in continuous variation is actually a cumulative effect of varying environmental factors on a variable genotype. And it also include a characteristics in a population that show a complete gradation from one extreme to the other without any break. So therefore, in the continuous variation is caused by both genes and environmental factors. So continuous variation are caused by both genes and environmental factors. Like for example, let's look at the continuous variation in plants. Like for example, availability of or competition for. So if the food is available, or if the nutrients are available, or light are available, water is available, or exposure to disease, of course, then if it is not available, it means that there will be a competition. So this is actually example of continuous variation. So sometimes you may have the availability of the nutrient, light, water, and of course exposure to disease, and of course sometimes there will be a competition because of the limited of the resources, which is the nutrients, light, or water. So then, of course, you can see that variation or continuous variation in animals, like for example, availability of foods slash balanced diet, exposure to disease, or the availability of health services for humans are also examples of continuous variation in animals. Okay. Then so then the next one is a discontinuous variation, and is seen where there are obvious or distinct categories for a future. So it's usually in a form of distinct. Like for example, uh, let's say red and black, apical and axial, green and yellow. So for example, in the discontinuous variation, there is no intermediate between categories. So the futures cannot usually change. It cannot usually change. There is no intermediate between categories, so the futures cannot usually change during the life. So during life, the future this continuous variation doesn't change. Like for example, the color of skin. If you are black, then of course you are black, and if you have fair skin, it means that you have a fair skin. So usually the skin color doesn't change with time until just because of recent the issue of the bleaching. So it is caused by a single or a small number of genes, that is mutation. So genes can affect this continuous variation, but no environmental influence. So environmental factors doesn't affect this continuous variation. So like for example, uh, so this is actually more explanation. So under variation, we have continuous, we have discontinuous. So under continuous, like a different characteristics within a population, like height, body, mass, and intelligence. So like for example, height can change, the body shape can change, the weight or mass of the body can change. But in the case of discontinuous variation, we have like blood group. If we have blood group A, then you have blood group A. It will never change. Tongue rolling. If your tongue are rolling, then it's rolling. And if it is not rolling, then it is not rolling. So that is why it doesn't have intermediates. And then of course, let's look at the differences between continuous and discontinuous. So you see in terms of the properties, no distinct categories. And here there is a distinct categories. And of course, no limit on the value, no in between categories. Tends to be quantitative, like the height, the weight, the heart rate, the finger length. And of course, this one tends to be qualitative. And examples, we have height, weight, heart rate, finger length, leaf length. And of course, for the examples of discontinuous variation, we have tongue rolling, fingerprint, eye color, blood groups. So you see, in the case, in terms of the representation, you see that continuous, it can increase. For example, if you look at the plot here, you can clearly see that from here, it changes, it increases, and it decreases. So it can increase or decreases. But this one, we use a line. This one is line graph. And of course, this one is bar charts. Is bar charts. So if this one is short, so it doesn't have actually no in between. There is a distinct categories. So it is controlled by a lot of genes and environmental or an environment. It continues by a lot of genes. An environment range of phenotypes between two extremes, like height in humans. So a few genes, a limited number of phenotypes with no intermediates. Example, blood group AB, A, B, AB, and O. So this is actually the differences between continuous and discontinuous variation. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, if this is the first time you are coming to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. Thank you.